How are you all doing? Wonderful. Hey, Molly and Lana started Joy and Java back to this afternoon, and it went well. And girls, if you are wanting to be a part of that, that is every Wednesday for the next few weeks from 4 to 5 p.m. So, Haley, how did it go? Great. Molly, how'd it go? Good? Awesome. Israel, can you turn off the lights in the fellowship hall? That would be a blessing to me. Couple other announcements. This coming Sunday is the deadline to sign up for Refuge Camp. Okay. How many of you have been to Refuge Camp with us before? Raise your hand. Okay. Oh, good, good. Okay, how many of you, raise your hand if you've never been with us to a Refuge Camp before? Raise your hand. Oh, y'all, get ready. It's going to be tight, as the children say, okay? Pastor Darren wanted me to, Joe, this is how Pastor Darren wanted me to advertise Refuge. He said, come to Refuge, it's going to be huge. That's what he said. Do you think Pastor Darren should market Refuge Camp? I don't know, maybe he was thinking like a meme of our former president, Donald Trump, where he said it's going to be huge or something when he would say that. I don't know if that's what he was thinking. So anyways, this camp is going to be 6 days. We're leaving on a Monday, July 5th, the day after the 4th of July. We are leaving, and we are going to South Carolina, okay? We are going to a college university campus called North Greenville University. Not too far from where Mrs. Laura Godwin went to school. She went to school at Bob Jones University, correct? And this school is not that school. It's different. But it's nearby. And we're going to be going there, and we'll be getting back on a Saturday. And if you are interested in potentially coming to this camp, please make up your mind, talk to your parents, ask any questions you need to. Zach was texting me questions Sunday night. Don't hesitate to do that. And I will answer any questions you have. And then your parents can sign you up online by Sunday. Cool. Then we also have coffee shop open tomorrow. And that is going to be grand and glorious. And we're back again Sunday. We're going to be doing this the next few weeks, having Sunday school on Wednesday nights. Wow, word on Wednesdays. We will continue what we started last Wednesday, a week from today, which is a lesson on how we can know the Bible is true. But tonight, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the basketball sensation. Dr. Mark Godwin is coming to bring a very interesting and powerful lesson tonight. So, put your hands together and welcome Mr. Godwin.
Pastor Chuck asked me to talk to you about critical race theory. And I gave blood here recently, and where it says race, what race am I? Sometimes I like to write in human, because that freaks them out. Man, what does that mean? Because you got all these categories. And categories divide us. Categories do not unite us. So I don't like categorizing people, and ideas have consequences. Ideas that start with God have good consequences. Ideas that start without God, well, ask Adam and Eve. They have bad consequences. Yes. So you don't want to start anything without God. But that's how a lot of our decisions are made. And that's how racism occurs. When you start without God, it's easy to find your way to think you are superior to another person. And it doesn't always have to be about the color of your skin. Pastor Chuck, he's a good fellow, so I don't think he'll mind me telling. Pastor Chuck and I had a conversation here not long ago, and he asked me to talk about this, and he said, I believe all people are equal. I agree, 100%. He said, but I think guys are smarter than girls. And I said, really? I said, well, being a science teacher, I'm intrigued by that. And I want to look at this before I get into this race issue. Let's just start with the gender issue, because that's a big deal today too, right? Are guys better than girls? Is it testable, repeatable, and observable? And we're going to find out, because I've been informed that some of the greatest minds, male and female, are here at our church. And representing the guys over here will be Dylan Cloud and Dylan Autry. Representing the ladies.
That's our best foot forward as a gender.
Yeah, if you got a cell phone, you're going to want to record this. Representing the ladies, these two will soon be part of my family, Jacqueline and Sarah Smither.
I know.
Yeah. And just to keep things from being too heated, as in terms of gender, we're going to have a combined effort here at Center Stage, Kendon and Anna Marie. So they'll come up here. Now, before I begin, I hate to even have to bring this up in church, Pastor. I hate to even mention the name Tar Heel or any of that stuff. But before I begin, are any of you Tar Heel fans? I need to know. Because cheating is not allowed in this. Don't win by cheat. So there's no gnawing, there's no tearing, there's no pulling. That's how they play basketball. But since they pay off the referees, none of us ever called it. So listen, hey, well, he's on drugs. This guy has drug test. And he's delusional. So there's no gnawing, there's no chewing, there's no tearing, no cutting, any of that stuff. And here's what you're going to do. I can speak loud enough you can still hear me. So what we have here is a critical thinking. We're talking about critical race. We're going to start off with a little critical thinking. Because sometimes you have to work smarter, not harder. And that's the very way we get through this issue of race and racism. It's not by overthinking, because it's real simple, folks. Let me just tell you how simple it is. If you start with God, you have to start at the Garden of Eden, all right? When God finished creation, he said everything he did was good. It was complete. It's like he wanted. And a lot of times when we talk about racism, it's associated with slavery. How many slaves did Adam have? None. How many did Eve have? None. So where you get God's prescription of things, that's like a doctor prescribes you. When you get God's prescription, it's found right there in the book of Genesis. That's why I didn't bring it with, but the answer's in Genesis. It's a ministry up in Kentucky that deals with a lot of these questions. You know, that's where you want to go for your answers. You want to go back to Genesis. What was God's plan? What did he prescribe for us? And there were no servants for Adam and Eve. They were to do their own work. So what about later on in the Bible where you get into some slavery? Okay, that's where God's describing what we did when we kicked him out of the Garden of Eden. We've been doing that for 6,000 years. We've been trying to create our own garden, our own utopia, our own little paradise on earth, but without him. That's what Adam and Eve did. And I'll explain how they did it. But first, here's how this works. Okay, Anna-Marie? Now I got these things where they can't come around because I don't want you to hurt yourself and like cut off your circulation or anything like that. So, Kendon, here. Okay. There we go. So now I want you to stand, Anna-Marie and Kendon, where they can see you, where everybody can see you. Now your job, ladies, gentlemen, and Anna-Marie, your job is to disconnect yourself without taking the rope off, without gnawing it, without chewing it. I don't think you can break it without hurting your wrist. So don't do that either. And gentlemen, here we go. Oh man, he's getting serious. Man, starts taking his jacket off. Dude is serious. Oh, here we go. And you guys have got to turn and face the crowd. You guys are the judges because we're not going to have no cheating. We're not going to have any cheating. All right? Now, I'm serious. If you got a phone, you're going to want a video of it. Yeah, you're a go, and I've already given you a hint. If you don't get this right, well, the guys will probably get it. I'm going to put my money on the guys. Just because I am one. But I do wish all of you wonderful success. and don't get hurt, okay? Because your dad's over there. He's like military. I don't want to hurt me. Yeah. He and I were hunting coyotes one time, and there was an electric fence on my farm, and he asked me, was it on? I'd have bet my life it was off. The fence was off. Well, he touched it, and it shot him bad, and he looked at me like he was going to hurt me. I wasn't laughing then. I'm like, he's going to hurt me. Okay, so here we go. When I say go, you guys, there's no time limit now. Don't stress out. I'm just going to give everybody the same opportunity. Then you go. All right, and I'm going to get out of the way. On your mark, get set, go. Oh, man, this is, they're getting into it. Oh, look, now make sure they're not cheating. They cannot come off there. Oh, look at that. Don't get hurt, buddy. Oh, man, look, this is. I'm in your way.
No, you're good.
Critical thinking. Can the guy. Oh, Dylan, did he get it? No. He's down. Okay, Ken and Anna Marie, they're planning a strategy. This is interesting, bro.
It is.
And I'm not going to show you how to do it either. I'll do this week after week after week. Uh-oh, Anna Marie, be careful with the heels. Can't believe I said that word. Heels. Strike that from the... Don't give up, guys. That's going to shame us. Don't shame us. At least keep trying. You cannot take it off your wrist. You can't break it. You can't chew it. The frustration is starting to set in. I can sense some frustration starting to set in. Have you seen these guys over here? They're getting into it. Have you ever seen this before?
No.
This is a treat.
It's impossible.
No. Me and you will show how I do it here one night. Do you know how to do it? Really? Are you serious? Huh?
That's worse.
Okay, let them have just a few more seconds, and then we'll see what you can do. Yeah. Mackenzie, did you do this?
You made me do it like 3 times when I took your class.
So you remember how to do it?
I remember.
Now, if she remembers how to do it, I'm going to be very, 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 very impressed.
Terrible.
I don't want to give it away.
All right. Y'all want to let somebody else try or y'all not done? You're not done. Let them have a little more time. We're not going to rush you. Oh, Dylan is getting a move going on there. He's got a move going on down there. Hey, you cannot cut it like that. Don't do that.
I think we can start a fire.
We got it. No, we didn't. No, we didn't get it.
Maybe that close. Maybe no. Okay, well let these two ladies here, they said that they can do this. And I have my doubt, but now Mackenzie does have, if she's got a good memory. How many years ago was that now?
8th grade.
8th grade?
I'm a senior now.
Okay, Kim and Anne Marie, I'm going to let these two ladies here step on the center stage.
I'm letting them get into it. And I'm
Now, if they actually do it, I want you to know how they do it, because that's the main idea, is how they do it.
Anna Marie failed their
I thought we got. She's from Princeton. impressed.
Good job, Sarah. Good
Wait a
job.
minute.
Jacqueline said she would be confident.
Oh,
Do it again. Everyone wants to say it again. Do it again. Do it. Everyone is looking. Do it again. Do it again.
Let me see. Hold on. I really
No, she's coming back in. They're getting tangled up.
It was just luck.
Oh, did you see that was smooth? That was smooth. Very good job. Excellent job. Good job, girls. Thank you. Hey, listen, if you've never done it or you've never seen it, that's an interesting trick to grab my stuff here.
We don't know how they did it.
like an hour in class the third week of
You gotta go to
Can we go now?
Yeah, you guys have a seat. You can come untangle too. How do you? Okay, you can untangle now. Hey, you got it. So I guess the girl was on that one there, brother. Huh? I got it right here. Am I good? Can you not hear me? Good job. Yeah, well, see, that requires, did you notice you can work hard at it? You can twist and step over the road and get tangled up in the road. And some people have seen them fall down. Can't let them get hurt. And that working harder does not always get you smarter. And I think therein lies the answer to racism. And to talk about all that in one night, it's not easy. But I will share this with you. There are three things I want to hit. That's the roots of racism. The roots of racism. You know, that stuff does not start with our generation. When I started school back in the 70s, we were already desegregated. Of course, if you go back and you look at my dad's high school yearbook, there's only white people in it. In my yearbook, there's white people and black people. In the yearbook today, there's white people, black people, and Latino people. So this thing did not start in our time. It's been going on a long time, and it's important to understand how it got started. It reminds me of this Bible verse, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 through 15. Pursue peace with everyone, as well as holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God. And here's most important, the no root of bitterness springs up to cause trouble and defile many. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about this idea of bitterness in his I Have a Dream speech. This week we celebrate his life. He was a Baptist minister, and he was named after the German theologian Martin Luther, who was a reformer. Started the Protestant movement. They protested the abuses at that time of the Catholic Church. They had this thing called indulgences, where you could pay money to be forgiven. You could pay money so God would forgive you, which is absolutely unbiblical. Because if I can pay money to get God's approval or forgiveness, why do I need Jesus to die for my sins? You understand that contradiction, don't you? So Martin Luther was a German theologian. Martin Luther was named after him. This past week I got a Christmas card from, but Martin Luther King said, "Let us not drink from the cup of bitterness." In other words, violence is not the answer to our problems. Violence just creates more violence. But I got a Christmas card from my uncle. My mom was German, some of you know that. And he was separated from his mother as a child, and in World War II, he was raised in East Germany. And if you don't know anything about that in history, East Germany was communist, socialist, socialism, communism. These are popular ideas going around today. And again, what are these ideas trying to do? They're trying to create a paradise, a Garden of Eden, separate from God. These are atheistic philosophies, and he grew up in that. His first day of kindergarten, the teacher said, "Let's pray and ask God for a chocolate chip cookie." And so the kids, dear God, I would pray for a chocolate chip cookie. And then they all raised their head, and to their disappointment, there was no chocolate chip cookie. Okay, kids, we're going to pray again. This time we're going to ask the government for a chocolate chip cookie, and don't raise your head until we ask you to. So while the kids were praying to the government for a chocolate chip cookie, a bunch of other teachers come in with little napkins and chocolate chip cookies, and they say, okay, kids, let's see what we got. And raise your hand. The government. Yes, the government is the answer to everything I need. The government is God. So what socialism and communism try to do is create a utopia, classless society where everybody's equal, but we don't need God to get us there. We can do it on our own. You see, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were equal. God created the idea of equality because we are image bearers of Him. Because we are made in God's image, that means, as God's Word says, He is no respecter of persons. He does not look at a president more importantly than He does you or I. He does not look at someone with money or status more importantly than He does you or I. All right? So there are ideas, socialism and communism, that are at work now, even in our own country, that are trying to get us to look in another direction to find this peaceful paradise, Garden of Eden, but apart from God. Now back to my Christmas card. I should have brought it with tonight, had a little show and tell. But my uncle was saying how things are bad in Germany with COVID. They're on lockdown. And but then he said something that just shocked me. He said, but we believe in God. He's 82 years old. And he, as well as his brothers, were atheists. And I got to call him and talk to him about this. This is huge. What has been the change here? Because he was not raised in a country like we were. As a matter of fact, my mother says she believed that was God's plan for her life, to come here so that she could be in a country where there was true freedom to hear the Word of God. And that's how she got saved, was when she came here to the United States. So, the roots of racism, the history of racism, and it's not a biblical concept. Now, I will tell you this, the Bible, some people had defended racism and slavery by saying Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then they all separated after the flood was over and went to different parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And one of his sons, Noah, was a sinner like us, right? Okay. He was righteous in the sense that he believed in God, but he was still under the same curse because his mom and daddy were Adam and Eve. And he got drunk after the ark landed. And while he was in that drunken state, one of his sons looked upon him inappropriately. And therefore, the Bible says that he was cursed for that. And well, Ham was the name of that son. He and his descendants moved to Africa. So some people have defended slavery, saying that black people were cursed because of what he did. But that's false. That curse did not pass upon his children. That curse was upon him for what he did. So that's a false way of using it. Another thing people have said is that sin, a lot of times, is alluded to in the Bible, dark as sin. So somehow black people were more sinful, and that's why we have slavery. But the Bible also says that people can be white as leprosy. Leprosy is a disease. Does that mean the Bible was trying to say all white people are diseased? Of course not. These are ideas that have been taken out of context. So it's important that you understand the root of racism and how it's been taken out of context, especially over the past 100 years. Okay? And that's why I want to play let's play the first 3 clips. I think these are videos. And I want to talk about what you see here. And if I run out of time, brother, you let me know. I can wrap it up another time. But I don't want to rush through it.
I don't know, sir. Some men change their times. One man changed the world for all time.
My name is Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi.
Well, whoever you are, we don't want you here. I suggest you get back on that train before it leaves.
They seem to want me.
Columbia Pictures presents a Richard Attenborough film, Gandhi.
100,000 Englishmen simply cannot control 350 million Indians if those Indians refuse to cooperate.
I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love has always won.
His greatest weapon, was peace.
In this cause, I too am prepared to die. There is no cause for which I am prepared to kill. I want to change their minds, not kill them for weaknesses we all possess.
We're required to stop it, and stop it we will.
If you take my husband, I intend to speak in his place.
I want to document coldly, rationally, what is being done here. I believe non-cooperation with evil is a duty, and that British rule of India is evil.
Nevertheless, it is my duty to sentence you to 6 years.
If we obtain our freedom by murder and bloodshed, I want no part of it.
It went on and on into the night. Whatever moral ascendancy the West held was lost here today.
What you cannot do is accept injustice from Hitler or anyone. You must make the injustice visible.
Ian Charlson.
What Mr. Gandhi has forced us to do is ask questions about ourselves.
Candace Bergen.
Yeah, so that was a preacher at the end saying what Mr. Gandhi has done is forced us to ask questions about ourselves. Now, if you don't know who Gandhi is, he inspired Dr. Martin Luther King through this idea of nonviolence. And the guy who was on the phone and he was reporting that the British are just shooting all these people, these unarmed innocent people, and he said whatever of morality, what's right, what's wrong, whatever moral ascendancy the West had. Now, who is the West? Europe, North and South America, the countries that make up Europe and North and South America, because you think most of us in here speak English or Spanish, so that means we came from Europe. That would be Spain and England. So the West refers to Europe, North and South America. Whatever morality they had was lost that day. That was about 1948. Everything they did was seen on this thing called television. And then at the end, the preacher was saying that Mr. Gandhi is challenging us to ask questions about ourselves. How did that happen to Christianity? Look, we're talking about British people. We're talking about the Pilgrims, right? The Pilgrims, those were the same people that the Pilgrims originated from, England. What happened to England that made them think that they had the right to go and just shoot people in front of them as if they were savages? You're getting ready to find out. It's going to shock you. What were the British doing in India? They're supposed to be in England. Does anybody know? It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, who used to control us? July 4th, 1776. Who did we declare our independence and freedom from? England. Well, they didn't like that because they got a lot of raw materials from us, namely cotton at that time. So they needed more cotton. So they got their globe out, they got their map out, and they got on the same latitude that we are about here in North Carolina, like 35 degrees north latitude, and they looked across Africa, 35 degrees north latitude is a desert. Saudi Arabia, desert. Boom, India, not a desert. And they can grow cotton. So the British left us after we kicked them out, and they went to India, and they just felt like they had some type of superior privilege that they could walk into India and tell the Indian people that they were going to serve them. And you got to ask yourself, what drove that mentality? That was not Christianity, folks. That if you try to use Christianity to justify what they did, that's not an abuse of Christianity, not a use. You got to be able to distinguish between an abuse and a use, a version of the truth and a perversion of the truth, right? Okay, can you show that next clip? You skip it.
I don't know, sir.
Yeah, skip it to the next one. 27 years in prison for speaking out against apartheid. Okay, Gandhi from India inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had inspiration on this gentleman. Anybody know who this man is? Nelson Mandela, who became the first black president of South Africa. Well, what was going on in South Africa? Very similar to what was going on here in the United States. We call it segregation. They call it apartheid. Dutch people from Holland, the Netherlands, they had gone and colonized South Africa and were treating the black people in South Africa much like the British were treating people in India. And that nearly cost a man his soul. Nelson Mandela was a socialist. He was a communist because he saw in that idea a rejection of this idea of colonialism, that you can take over another people and treat them as inferior. And he saw in it that it had this idea of equality, which, by the way, when you hear socialism and communism, it does produce equality. You're all equally poor. 99% of the people have nothing. And then you have a small group of people who run the Communist Party, the Socialist Party. They have everything. Look at Venezuela. Look at Cuba. Look at North Korea. Look at countries in history such as Russia, that was the Soviet Union. It fails miserably every time. But it sounds good on paper. Yeah, I ask kids at school all the time, how many of you think that's a good idea? Everybody is going to be equal. Socialism is going to give it. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I said, well, that's great, because some of you have a 20 in my class, and some of you have 100. So I'm going to make all of you equal. I'm going to take 40 points from the people with 100, and I'm going to give it to the ones with a 20. So all of you have a 60. We'll all be the same. And all of a sudden, the people with 100 are like, I don't like that idea. That's a terrible idea. And see, Nelson Mandela realized that we needed more than that. There needed to be not just a change of our government, a change of a philosophy that we're living by. There needed to be a change in a heart, and only Christianity can do that. He became a Christian. And you know what he did in South Africa to deal with the hurt between groups? And I don't like to call them races, and I don't like to use that word. I say we are ethnic groups. The Bible says there is one race. It's called the human race. And among the human race, there are different ethnic groups, like white people, black people, Latino people, Jewish people, Arab people, Asian people, you name it. And they're dressed a little different. We all have different foods, you know, but we're the same. We're one race with different ethnic groups. And that's been lost over time. Now, how did it get lost? Well, it started with Adam and Eve, right? In the garden, God defined reality. He said it was good. And he even let Adam jump in and define some things, didn't he? In Genesis chapter 2, he let Adam define the animals. But then, Adam and Eve, who came in on the picture? Who came in? The deceiver, Satan. And he said, God didn't tell you everything about creation. He didn't tell you everything about reality. He didn't tell you that you can redefine it in your own image. You can be God. And that's where mankind failed. That's the reason we see a lot of problems we have today. And you don't understand that unless you have a biblical worldview. If you pursue any other worldview other than given to us in the Bible, it will lead you into further confusion. But the Bible explains it, and it helps us fix it. But that trend continued throughout history. At the Tower of Babel, what did they say when they were going to build this tower to reach heaven? The people said, let us make a name for ourselves. Well, we already had a name. God gave us a name. He called us man when he made man and woman. And then, of course, we lost that image, didn't we? Because if you go a few chapters into Genesis, God doesn't call creation man anymore. He calls us flesh. Right before the flood destroys all of humanity, God does not even refer to us in the same way he did, because we don't even look like that which he made. And then at the Tower of Babel, we try to redefine reality again, redefine who God has named us. And it goes on through history, even up to the time of Christ. What happened whenever Christ, nobody ever found him guilty of anything, did they? Nobody did. You had two groups of people who were dealing with Jesus. You had the Jews, who were the bearers of the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments. And they were proud of that too. But what did Caiaphas say? Even though he knew Jesus was innocent, Caiaphas was a high priest. And he said, it's better one man die. Even though he knew that man was innocent, it's better that one man die and the nation survive, talking about the Jews. And then when he went before Rome, he went before Pilate, who was the representative of Rome. And they thought that they had it going on too. The Roman Republic, which became the Roman Empire. And Pilate knew he was innocent. What did he do? He crucified him anyway. So you see that this has plagued us on and on and on up into our time. But that's what I want to talk about, is the last 100 years, our time. And I think we're going to have a little louder clip next. Yeah. Yeah, this is my favorite thing I do at school.
Mum, won't you tell me why they say the sun never sets on the British Empire? Well, that's because we've colonised the entire world. It's a big world and it's ours to have. We'll even take it from you because we want it that bad. India, Africa, we won't get tired because the sun never sets on the British Empire. It's a big world and it's ours to have. We'll even take it from you because we want it that bad. Africa, India, we won't get tired because the sun never sets on the British Empire. Who kicked off all industry? Yup, it was us Brits, you can trust me. But now our raw materials are looking dusty. Let's try imperialism. That's what it must be. Looks like indigenous peoples are hurting. We should help them out. It's the white man's burden. Run up in their land, take their gold, get them under control, yo, anything goes. I thought it was our mission to civilize. They'll give us what we want, but all we gotta give is lies. Social Darwinism says we're more advanced, and we don't need dark-skinned people.
So vocabulary tells us what happened. Now, where did the British and other European countries, like the Dutch who went into South Africa, where did they come up with this empire, this idea that they had the right to go and take over other peoples? Well, here he is, the origin of the species, but you might want to hear the whole title. The origin of the species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Charles Darwin was an Englishman who came up with, and I'm not going to beat him up here tonight, but he came up with man's best idea for the reality that we experience. Okay, survival of the fittest, the struggle for life of the most favored races of people. So now you start to understand where racism comes from. Well, what did he have to say about other people other than the British people? European type people, you know, the Spanish, the French, the British, the Germans, Italians. I think I got a quote from him. Yeah, here it is. He said, at some future period not very distant, as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man, he's talking about obviously himself, the British, the European people, will almost certainly exterminate, and replace the savage races throughout the world. Who was he talking about? He was talking about Native American Indians, Aborigines, black people, that they would be exterminated. Now, you're going to maybe have a class one day on science and, oh, you're going to find out, your teacher's going to say, but he was an abolitionist, he was against slavery. Well, you would be against slavery if you wanted to exterminate people. Think about the Bible. What happened in Egypt when the Jews were slaves? They became so many that Pharaoh said we have to get rid of the firstborn male because people in slavery still have kids. So he would be against slavery because he was actually for extermination. And you see, that's why you have to read the book. You got to find out where these ideas are coming from. Who was his greatest disciple? Probably a guy by the name of Adolf Hitler, because he took the idea of Darwinism and he put it into the word you saw at the end of that clip. Social Darwinism is taking an idea, and remember what I told you about ideas. Ideas have consequences. When you take an idea off the pages of a textbook, that's called extrapolate, pull out, and you apply it to society, something's going to happen. And all throughout Germany, I've been to a few of them, Dachau, concentration camps, where people were literally, millions of people exterminated under the guise of science, under the name of science. And could you go to the next clip or quote? Oh, You can't read that probably, but that's a picture of a page out of my textbook about the cell theory. That's 7th grade. You should have already studied it if you didn't fall asleep. Hey, if they had told you the rest of the story, you wouldn't have fallen asleep. Yeah, the cell theory just says that all living cells come from prior living cells. That means you can't get life from non-life. And it should be easy enough to understand. And notice who came up with this idea. Scheiden, Schwann, and Virchow. These are 3 German scientists who lived about 100 years before Hitler. And Hitler took this idea, along with Darwin's idea on race, and he said, okay, well, if we're all made up of cells, guess what? There's 2 kinds. There's eukaryotic cells, that's you and me, that's how I remember that, eukaryotic cells, you and me. And then there's prokaryotic cells, those are bacteria. And those are bad, that's why we get antibiotics to take care of us. And the doc can tell us that. And he said that some of the cells in our society are bacterial cells. They're harming the body, they're harming the organism, and that we need to get rid of them. So he took these scientific concepts that were written 100 years earlier by English, Darwin, and German scientists, and he applied that to society during his era in German history known as the Third Reich. All right, next one. This guy survived. He's a neurologist, and he survived Auschwitz. And his name is Viktor Frankl. Frankl, he was a Jew. He said, if we present man with a concept that is not true, in other words, that you evolved over millions of years from some lower form of animal, that's evolution. We may well corrupt him. You reckon? That's maybe true. When we present him as an ultimatum of reflexes, a bundle of instincts, or a bundle, well, that picture's not up there more, a bundle of cells. That's all you are. You're just a bundle of cells. As a pawn of drive and reaction, or DNA, as a mere product of heredity and environment, we feed the amoral, that means no morals, impulses to which modern man is in any case prone. You know, I found that very interesting. He says that modern man is prone to be immoral. I always thought the people who lived a long time before us, like in the Middle Ages, like King Arthur and those guys, I thought they were more immoral or amoral than we are. I thought we'd evolved and we were better than them. He says no. He said, have you ever wondered that that's true, that the evolution says everything's getting better, but when you look at the world, the evidence suggests everything's getting worse. And that's what he's saying. Modern man is getting worse. He said, I became acquainted with the last stages of corruption in Auschwitz. The gas chambers of Auschwitz were ultimate consequence of the theory that man is nothing but the product of a heredity and environment, or like the Nazis said, blood and soil. Now listen to this last sentence. He said, I'm convinced that the gas chambers of Auschwitz were ultimately prepared not in some Nazi office in Berlin. He says, I'm not even blaming the Nazis for Auschwitz, the gas chambers. He said they were prepared in classrooms of amoral scientists and philosophers, like out of that textbook that's used in our public schools, by the way. All right, can you show the next clip, please? Yeah, they're just staring like having a staring contest. Maybe that's what we'll do next time. We'll see who blinks first. That's another good one right there. I can do that a long time. Yeah. That's Darwin. Yeah. And it'll blow your mind to know where that guy's buried. Yeah. Does anybody know where he's buried?
Westminster Abbey.
He's buried in a church, Westminster in England. The man who buried the church is buried in the church. Isn't that interesting? All right, next clip. I just want to stare thing there. All right, here's one of his disciples, the disciples of Darwin, Richard Dawkins. He's famous doctor of biology. He's still alive. He says, much as we might wish to believe otherwise, universal love and welfare of the species as a whole are concepts which simply do not make evolutionary sense. In other words, evolution has nothing to say when it comes to how we should treat each other, morally, right or wrong, those abstract, intangible ideas. Now look at the next quote he gave here recently. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom or at the end no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Now, here's what I want you to get. Lately, all we've been hearing is what does science have to say? What does science have to say? I mean, all the politicians are saying that about COVID, and science does have something to say about that. But what if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have used a science book as the basis of his I Have a Dream speech? Have you ever read it? Did they say how many times he quotes the Bible? Over and over and over again. What if he used a science book? What if he had used what we teach most of our kids nowadays in public school about origins? He probably would have actually proven the very thing he was trying to disprove. He would have actually proven that if science is right, some people do have an academic basis on which to say, I'm superior, I'm better than you. I had a buddy of mine, he taught evolution to the kids where I taught at my previous school, and we got into this conversation. He asked me, are you saying all evolutionists are Nazis? And I said, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you couldn't have had Nazism without evolution. That is an academic reason to see yourself as superior to someone else and make yourself feel intelligent about it at the same time. All right, next one. Here's what Dr. King said. Now think about it. This is a powerful quote. The function of education is to teach one intensively and think critically. Now, like you did the little road trip. And think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal or the most dangerous person may be the man who's gifted with reason. He can think, but he has no morals. Gifted with the ability to think, but you have no morals. And you can't find morals under a microscope. So when it comes to how we're going to look and treat each other as different ethnic groups, you're not going to find the answer in the science book. As a matter of fact, the answer you're going to find is the wrong answer. You're only going to find it in a biblical worldview, a gospel worldview. Tells us we're all Jew, Gentile, different ethnic groups. If we're in Christ, we're brothers and sisters, we're one. And you know, science, if you know anything about human DNA, it's our information system, right? That makes us all unique. They finished mapping the human genome in 1999. And the scientists who mapped the human genome, when they finished, they said they might as well change applications. We shouldn't even be putting it on applications what race you are. Because based on what we know now about DNA, that the word race is a social construct. There is no such thing. Your melanin that makes up your skin color is less than 1% of who we are. Yeah. So why don't we cancel Darwin? How does he survive all this cancel culture stuff? Tearing down statues, and why aren't we getting rid of him? I'll tell you what I want to do. I'm not going to give you the answer. But next time you let me talk, I'll bring maybe even a gift certificate. I'd be highly impressed, the person who can tell me how he has survived the cancel culture acts that so many other people have fallen victim to. Yeah, recently. Think about it. There's a reason why we will never put him under that scrutiny. All right, can you go to the next? That's it. Okay, and I think I have about used up my time. Pastor Chuck shared this document with me, and how much time have I got, brother? I don't want to.
6 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we went over the roots of racism. We've been over the record of racism. Where has it gotten us, man? It's gotten us nowhere. The worst idea ever. And unfortunately, it's kind of rooted in some bad science that I hope some of you will think about why we won't let go, why we won't cancel it. Cancel Darwin. That'd be a cool idea. But there's a reason we won't. I want you to think about that. And now we have, what is the remedy for racism? The remedy for racism is the gospel. But you're going to hear more about this critical race theory. And there's just two words that go with critical race theory that you might want to be familiar with. That's called intersectionality, and that because of, let me see how I want to word this to make sure I word it right. The way critical race theory looks at us is that over time, over specifically the last 100 years, some groups have been marginalized and oppressed. Among those groups would be minorities, okay, such as black people, and transgender, the LGBTQ community. They put that in there too, which is a very dangerous thing to do because, you know, when you were born, you didn't choose your skin color. You didn't say, hey, God, I believe I'll belong to a Asian family, so that'll be mine. You didn't ask, I didn't either, right? So the reason that discrimination is wrong is because that's not a choice you made. You can't discriminate against somebody over something they didn't choose. But what happens when we throw the transgender LGBTQ issue into this idea of critical race theory, that these people too are being oppressed? Because if you believe that, then you're admitting that they too are born that way. People who make those choices to be transgender or homosexual or whatever, that's not a choice they made. And that's the question that you're asking. Is it a choice that they made or is it not a choice that they made? And we're not judging people, folks. That's not the issue here. As a matter of fact, we don't judge people, we judge ideas. And the gospel is all about showing compassion, but not compromising on what it says. But the gospel is very clear that some ideas are good and some ideas are bad. And if the gospel is true, that's going to bear itself out in reality. And at my school, my job is to teach reproductive health. And when I deal with these issues, I go straight to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And it has information that's very, very applicable to what we're talking about here. People who pursue the LGBTQ lifestyle run a significantly higher health risk at other health problems that people who don't pursue that lifestyle do not have. Okay? So it's not about those people are less than and that we should oppress them. It's that they're making they're choosing an idea that's negative, and that needs to be talked about. We don't talk about people, but we do talk about ideas. The Bible says that there's an egalitarianism of the person. We are all equal, but there's a hierarchy of ideas. Ideas don't have feelings. People come first. Ideas are what we judge. And we should never fail to do that. Because in doing that, I think that's how we express love to our brother. When we reach out and say, hey, look, man, I care about you. Is that really the best idea? But the critical race theory takes the line that to do that, to question the idea, yeah, that's the document that he shared with me. To question that idea is to be oppressive, that we should affirm that idea. But you might not want to do that. I know one gentleman, his son went off to college, and he came back from college, and he had said, you know, I met somebody and I love them, and it was his boyfriend. And the father, wanting to affirm him and support him, didn't question it. And then his son contracted AIDS and died. So sometimes when we get into these ideas about tolerance and inclusiveness and diversity, they may be those three things. They may be tolerant, they may be a show of diversity or a show of inclusion, but they're not very loving. Because love deals with the idea at hand in a truthful way, even if it's contradictory to the way that person is pursuing that idea. And that is the message of the gospel. What is it in a nutshell, guys? Sin is the root of all this. Sin, anytime, like Adam and Eve, when they were faced with to trust God or not. What did God tell them? The garden is yours. Everything here is yours except for this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Do you trust me? And that's the same question that we're having to deal with today. Do we trust God with the answer to how we look at each other as human beings, as one race made up of many ethnic groups? And if you'll look at each other through that lens, through the lens of the gospel, There will be no room for racism. You will do like Dr. Martin Luther King did. You will not judge a person by the color of their skin. You will judge them by the content of their character. And that's the gospel. He was a Baptist preacher. And he changed the world with the message of the gospel. And that's how I want to leave tonight. I want to challenge you. When you have an opportunity to deal with this topic, do it through the lens of the gospel. Because that's the only thing that's going to change society. The other ideas that are not biblical are going to do what they've always done. They're going to fail. But the next time I speak, I want to challenge you. Why aren't we going to cancel Darwin? That'll be my big question. Do you want me to close with a word of prayer, or do you want to?
Sure.
All right. Let's bow our heads and we'll pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight and dealing with a very sensitive topic. But Father, when we deal with it through the lens of your word, through the gospel,